ora sine signum accende, imite spiritum tuum et creabuntur.
Et in nobis pacem Dei.
Oremus Deus qui corona fidelium sancti spiritus solus ratium ducovisti, Doramis in iodem spiritu recta sapere, et de eius semper consolatione godere per Christum Dominum nostrum.
Amen.
Sede sapientiae.
Ora pro nobis.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Continuing with the reign of Pope Simplicius. So, we mentioned last time the fact that the final sentence against Eutychianism had been pronounced at Chalcedon, and nothing remained but simply to carry it into execution. So Eutychianism, once again, monophysitism, the heresy that there was only one nature in Christ, in extreme reaction to Nestorianism, which held that there were two persons in Christ because there were two natures. So in a very common instance of someone going to the opposite extreme of one error, comes up with yet another one, which has to be avoided by always keeping in mind the fact that truth is not determined by its opposition to error, by its relation to error in any sense. It is obviously the truth is opposed to error, but it is not defined by its relation to error. This is something that very commonly people fail to notice. One heresy after another in the history of the church has arisen from it. And in fact, I might say that Lutheranism, Martin Luther came up with his system of errors by taking anything he liked and any notion that he liked and taking it far beyond the truth. And also that was one of the things he did to formulate his system of errors. And another thing he did was to, looking upon anything he didn't like, going to the exact opposite extreme of it, and latching onto that and taking that far beyond anything that could possibly resemble the truth. So, or far beyond what was actually the truth. So that's a very common thing. Martin Luther is perhaps the most extreme example of it, but not the only one by any means. So Eutychianism had been condemned at the Council of Chalcedon, which I've already covered. And now nothing remained but to carry into execution. This is what has been done in the history of the church time and again. The condemnation of an error or the enactment of a disciplinary decree. And then after that, the enforcement of the condemnation or the implementation of the disciplines still remain to be carried into effect. So, certainly in the decades immediately following, for example, the Council of Trent, there were many popes whose reigns were mainly characterized by the implementation of various decrees of the Council of Trent, mainly disciplinary ones, because the doctrinal ones that takes doesn't in a sense that takes less time to go into effect in practice. Many times that just means them ousting from rooting out from the church, the legal structures of the church, those who still adhere to that heresy. And that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at the heresies or the heretics who still adhere to the heresy of monophysitism, looking at making sure that they are ousted, that they are not allowed any positions of authority in the church, in order, that, of course, to preserve the faith of the faithful. So when Acacius, strengthened by the support of the sovereign pontiff, left nothing undone to carry out his instructions. He had recourse to Saint Daniel the Stylite. So these were stylites, were these really hermits who lived on the top of columns. I'm not sure how all the logistics of that worked. I know they had to have food delivered to them somehow so that they could survive. But they were these hermits who lived on the top of columns. I'm not sure the exact dimensions of the columns, but that was something that was recognized at the time. This particular Saint Daniel the Stylite, whose holiness and eminent virtue had the greatest power of the minds of the people, and told him of the perilous position of the church and the faith. So, perilous position for the church, as I understood correctly, the church, of course, could never die, but the church can suffer harm. The church can be in danger of suffering harm, of suffering setbacks, of losing influence, of having many souls taken away from her. The church can be in danger of all of those things. Never in danger of being destroyed, but the church can be in danger of being, in some sense, eclipsed, to suffering serious setbacks, and not being able to do as much good amongst souls here and now as it could otherwise be doing. So, Basiliscus dreaded the effect of an accusation coming from the column where the holy hermit preached so eloquently to the multitude of the sanctity of his life. He therefore sent some of the officers of his court to complain to the saint of what he called the insolence of Acacius, whom he accused of stirring up the people against him. So notice what he's doing there. He is stirring up people against the legitimate bishop of Constantinople, Acacius, by making false accusations against him, where the false accusations against him being that he is making false accusations against this Basiliscus. So, and notice a professional hypocrisy there, strategic hypocrisy. That's something that exists to this day, most definitely. Perhaps more explicitly as a conscious strategy now than ever before. That's true. When you look at today's leftists, just listen to the accusations they make against people they don't like, and you know exactly what they're up to. Sometimes even the first way of learning what they're up to. In some instances, the first piece of evidence of what they're up to is the accusations they make. Sometimes you hear something they say, I didn't know they were up to that. And sure enough, they are. Notice how specific their accusations are. He's doing this for all of these reasons, all these motives. They're describing themselves. Just keep that in mind. They're describing themselves. And they're trying to deflect attention from the fact that that's what they are doing and how they are motivated by ascribing that to their enemies. So yes, that is explicit, professional, strategic hypocrisy. It's not a new thing. It's just worse now than ever before. So keep that in mind. Daniel sent back the reply to the emperor that his reign would be soon cut short as a punishment for his impiety, and that the hand of God was already raised in anger against him. Moved by the urgent entreaties of Acacius, the holy old man thought that he might follow the example of St. Anthony, who had on a similar occasion gone into Alexandria to defend the persecuted church. Remember St. Anthony of the Desert, who was a personal acquaintance of St. Athanasius. He accordingly repaired, that's an archaic use of the word. He went there, he went to Constantinople, so he came down from his column, came out of his place of solitude as a hermit, and went to Constantinople, where the people were so moved at his presence that Basiliscus thought it prudent to quit the capital to escape the effects of the popular emotion. So sometimes people can be, popular emotion, the emotions of the multitude can be moved in the right direction to good. That can happen. But the point is, something else to keep in mind is the fact that people are very easily swayed, generally. The multitudes, the crowds can be moved in the right direction one day and the wrong direction the next. It can happen very suddenly. For any number of reasons. Sometimes for a good reason, sometimes not. More often than not, for no good reason. But the point is, generally speaking, people can be manipulated rather easily. So from the palace into which he had withdrawn in the suburbs of the city, he sent messengers to Daniel, but the hermit refused to receive them. The usurper then came in person, hoping to win him over by this mark of deference. Daniel publicly upbraided him for his fault and added, "You shall soon feel the hand of him who crushes the mighty." The prediction did not long await fulfillment. Zeno, who was still in exile in Isauria, soon received professions of loyalty from some of the most powerful senators, whom the tyranny of Basiliscus had revolted. Relying upon their support, he marched toward Constantinople at the head of a constantly swelling army of Isaurians, the Ionians, and the mercenary adventurers. So this is just a preview, we might say, or the beginning of a great deal of this kind of thing happening in the East, in Constantinople. If that's most of the history of the Eastern Roman Empire, post the fall of the Western Roman Empire, is just one long series of intrigues and overthrowing and backstabbing and eye gouging and all kinds of other horrible things in contest for the throne of a rapidly diminishing empire that has increasingly little to offer to civilization, to the general stability of the political, what I might call the geopolitical order at the time, and it's precious little edification to offer to anybody ever. What you don't often hear about is that that's how the famous Fourth Crusade went off the rails. That's how it was derailed. That's far ahead of our time right now, but long story short, they needed money. Wars cost money, even when wars are waged for holy causes. Wars still cost tremendous amounts of money. The Fourth Crusade needed money. A claimant to the throne of Constantinople promised it to them, to the members of the Fourth Crusade, if they were to help him come into power. They helped him come into power. He was assassinated thereafter. Nothing unusual in itself. So they didn't get paid. So they decided we have to take this money for ourselves. We have to see to it that we ourselves get paid. Solution: sack the city of Constantinople. Not justified, but that was how the reasoning went. And that was due to, in other words, the intrigues and the machinations of all of the Eastern Romans, of the Byzantines, of the Greek Empire, were such that they were so expansive as to potentially bring in entire crusades, which they did. And that was the second time that Fourth Crusade went off the rails and got excommunicated by Pope Innocent III. But that is for the future. It's far ahead of what we're looking at now, but notice that this is only the 5th century that we're looking at, and this is already starting. You see the problems, the beginnings of all of these problems. Would just get worse and worse with time. Everything would get worse. The problems you see already, all these heresies, all of these challenges to the authority of the Pope, and not so much to his authority directly, as head of the church, as the vicar of Christ on earth, as he to whom all Christians everywhere must be subject, and for eternal salvation. Of course, everybody everywhere must be a member of the church, and recognizing that all true Christians are subject to him. Not so much challenges in that respect, but challenges to his authority, in as much as those whom he installs are constantly being given trouble. We might in that sense call it constant indirect challenges to the authority of the Roman Pontiff. All of that would just get worse and worse and worse, and eventually his authority would be challenged directly, and the whole of the East would just go into schism. We're talking about the Greek Empire, the Greek schism, the schism of the Eastern Roman Empire, of the Byzantine Empire. All of the seeds of all of that, it's already there. Not only has it's already been an abundant source of heresy, but would also continue, but later on become a place of schism, general schism, where even those who are Catholics still have, in a sense, one eye on schism. That becomes clear as well. That they who are even those who return to the unity of the church in these areas of which would later become schismatic, that they have more of a sense of camaraderie with their fellow countrymen who are schismatics than with other Catholics, with whom the bonds are objectively stronger, but they have less a sense of camaraderie, of unity with other Catholics than with their fellow countrymen who are schismatics. So it's a problem. This whole area is a problem. But notice also that the church never ceases to make every effort to do good to souls who live in these areas. The church will never, to the extent possible, refrain from, in some sense, bending over backwards to do good for souls. Now, different popes have different ideas of what constitutes prudent measures to do good to souls, do good for souls, but the church always in some way bends over backwards to provide for that. However much trouble there might be. That might be the only good for the church in a particular place, making any particular effort, is the good of souls that will be here accomplished. There's other than that, nothing but a source of headache and trouble, constant trouble. And that's what we're looking at in the East already. Yes, there are saints in the East, no doubt. Notice, though, that many of the most famous names we've seen already of the saints in the East. And it just becomes more and more a source of trouble and less a source of saints. So, Zeno, I already mentioned him. Basiliscus, as cringing and base in adversity as he had been haughty and proud in the moment of power, hastened at these tidings to the church of St. Sophia, where he officially retracted all that he had done in favor of Timothy Elurus and Peter the Fuller. He anathematized Nestorius and Eutyches, and received the council of Chalcedon, which he had hitherto rejected. But it was too late. The Thracian troops he had sent with his palace guards against Zeno after a bloody engagement under the walls of Nice went over to that prince's standard, and he entered Constantinople in triumph. Basiliscus was banished to Cappadocia, where he died of starvation. This will sound more and more familiar as we go through church history later. We won't cover the whole sordid history of the Byzantine Empire, but anytime we do, anytime church history brings that into the spotlight, and this is going to sound pretty familiar as we move through subsequent sections of church history. It's just sickening, to put it bluntly. Zeno's first care was to go with the empress to visit the holy solitary Daniel, to whose prayers he ascribed his return. He wrote to St. Simplicius intimating his desire to crush the Eutychian heresy, to enforce the decrees of the Council of Chalcedon, and to restore Solo Faciolus to the See of Alexandria. He accordingly annulled all the decrees issued by Basiliscus to the detriment of the faith and of the Catholic bishops. Peter the Fuller was deposed, and the See of Antioch was given to Stephen, a true Catholic. Paul of Ephesus suffered the same fate. Timothy Solo Faciolus was restored to the throne of Alexandria. The intruder Elurus is said to have caused his own death. So all the details of this is just one of many instances of things like this that happened, perhaps on a larger scale than usual, with a more dramatic turnaround than might sometimes have taken place. But notice, though, that the point that we're really making by looking at all these details is the fact that it is to the Pope that everybody looks for a solution to all of this. In the East, nobody's challenging the authority of the sovereign pontiff directly, at any rate, in the East at this point. We constantly come back to that. Much of what we study in church history is by way of apologetics. Church history is a combination of a few different things. A church history course in a seminary certainly is a combination of a few different things, and one of those is apologetics. How to give answers, how to correctly understand various historical scenarios, various historical events, for the purpose of explaining them correctly, how they in no way provide a basis for any kind of assault upon the church. Because most accusations against Catholics come, or many of them anyway, take the form of twisted versions of historical events, presented in such a way as to make the church look evil. And all it takes to answer it most of the time is just a correct explanation of the facts. It's correct when you correctly understand what actually happened, you realize where the twisting has been done, and you can help people to disentangle that. Both to answer people who make those accusations, so as to show that they have no credibility and when they say such things, and also to help the faithful avoid confusion, either extricate them from it or help them avoid it altogether by presenting the facts of the situation. So sometimes it takes a little research. There's always another example, some other historical event that people will seize upon by means of which to attack the church. So it does sometimes take research. But many times you look at a situation like this and you say, okay, not that anybody uses this particular scenario as a means of attacking the church, but what you can do is point to such a scenario as this as an example to anybody who might say, oh, the authority of the Pope was never recognized in the East. That was something that was invented later on, or whatever nonsense they come up with. You can point out, no, here is a very well documented case of the Pope clearly being called upon, clearly being looked to sort out a messy situation. And that's clearly what we have before us here. The heretical bishops, so elected as the successor to Elurus, Peter Mongus, or the Stutterer, Archdeacon of Timothy Elurus, hoping by this means to perpetuate the schism in the Church of Alexandria. But Zeno gave them no time to carry out their plans. Peter Mongus was by the emperor's order cast into exile. The energetic measures adopted by the emperor to uphold the Catholic faith in the principal eastern seas caused a violent reaction on the part of the heretics, also nothing new. Heretics, even when they've clearly been exposed as heretics, their bad faith has been made clear that they are, for one thing, teaching serious errors contrary to divine revelation, and also that they are in bad faith, that they, despite every effort of the church to bring them back, they still persist and resist in what they're doing. They are thereby shown to be truly malicious. Even when once that has been so proven, there's in a sense all diplomatic measures have been employed. It's at such times that the church begins to then issue censures, issue excommunications, depositions, etc., and the civil power, when it is itself well behaved, begins to enforce those decrees in the civil order, and that might sometimes even mean waging wars. As you can see, this is of cases of violence here, violent reaction on the part of heretics that can boil over into warfare sometimes. That has, indeed. So, these energetic measures cause a violent reaction. St. Stephen, legitimate patriarch of Antioch, who had succeeded the usurper Peter the Fuller, was killed in his own church in the heat of a popular tumult. His mangled body was dragged through the streets of the city, loaded with outrages, and then thrown into the Orontes. Zeno dealt with the ringleaders of the sedition with the utmost severity, and would have made the rebellious city feel the further weight of his indignation had they not sent a deputation of their chief citizens to solicit forgiveness, which the emperor granted. So he did not. You could see how, in a situation like this, an emperor might get a little overzealous and then order the murdering of large numbers of people. Maybe in a place that truly caused trouble, but you could see how someone could get carried away in a situation like that. After seeing something horrible that they did, to then respond in kind to in an excessive degree. Whether responding in kind is the correct response or not is a whole other thing. Many times that's not to be done. Ordering slaughter of anybody at all is not the way to go. You have to find the ringleaders, perhaps. It's not to say that nobody should suffer the death penalty, but definitely not large-scale retribution, slaughtering the innocent together with the guilty. That is not the response. But you could see how somebody could be urged on to that in the heat of anger, seeing the crime committed by some population, and be tempted to respond in kind, and also to a worse degree. You can see how that could happen. That too has happened, in fact. Famous case of the Emperor Theodosius, the one who outlawed paganism and made the Catholic faith the religion of the empire, did that. So, in any case, in this particular instance, the emperor grants forgiveness to the population who have repented, perhaps, hopefully with sincerity, but on the occasion of realizing that they could indeed find themselves at the receiving ends of the emperor's the soldiers of the emperor's the receiving ends of the weapons of the emperor's soldiers. They are, at least on that, upon realizing that, repent sufficiently to express some kind of sorrow for having done what they did. A new patriarch, Stephen the Younger, was elected for Antioch and consecrated at Constantinople by Acacius. This consecration was not conformable to the canonical rule. It should regularly have been performed at Antioch by the assembled bishops of Syria. So notice this again: to secure the validation of the act of the emperor and Acacius, the act of something's wrong here. I'll have to check this. But in any case, Acacius wrote to the emperor. Okay, to secure the validation of the act. Little comma there. Make that clear. The emperor and Acacius wrote to Pope Simplicius. Notice that. We have a situation here. They did something they shouldn't have done. Consecrate the bishop in this particular place under these circumstances done by this bishop that shouldn't have been done. What do? You write to the sovereign pontiff. So, sorry. So clearly, the Pope is the one to whom everybody turns for a resolution of a situation like that. So they urged the great necessity in which they were placed to act thus and overlook the canonical observance in order to establish quiet in Antioch. So, still not good, but if you have time to write to the Pope to explain the situation afterwards, that should have been done beforehand, per se, and we leave all this to the judgment of the pontiff, who received that explanation and in a letter to the emperor, dated June 22nd, 479 AD, expressed himself as follows: since you have deemed it necessary for the peace of Antioch to consecrate a bishop for that see in Constantinople, still reserving to the assembly of the Eastern bishops the right of consecrating the bishop of Antioch for the future, the apostle St. Peter receives your promise and your oath, provided that this exceptional case be not hereafter adduced as a precedent. So he's saying that wasn't good. In itself, that was not good. Given the extraordinary circumstances, all right, we'll give it the stamp of approval after the fact, for the good of the church. We won't insist on putting someone else in place, but don't do that again. Really, do not do that again. This is not something we want to have established as a precedent. And notice this: the Bishop of Constantinople and the Emperor of Constantinople both write to the Roman Pontiff seeking his approval for actions that they took under extraordinary circumstances in the 5th century. No question whatsoever about who is the visible head of the church on earth. The sovereign pontiff at the same time addressed the same explanation and caution to the people of Constantinople, and peace was thus restored to the Eastern churches. So this is something the Pope can do. Even when a bishop has been consecrated and under circumstances under which that should not have been done. And there have been worse cases than this of such a scenario. So a bishop being consecrated under circumstances under which he should not have been consecrated by someone by whom he should not have been consecrated, the Pope can still give that the stamp of approval after the fact. In general, the general principle is that anyone who receives, most especially orders, under circumstances under which he should not have received them, he's not allowed to exercise those orders. So other sacraments, yes, someone's baptized outside of the church, maybe validly, he be received into the church, that should not have been done, but he will still be received into the church. But if someone who receives orders in an illicit manner, ordinarily, that's it, they're done. You'll be reduced to the lay state, typically. In some sense, having that ordination annulled. Annulled in a legal sense. If the sacrament has been validly conferred, nothing can ever change that. But the church will legally make it so that ordination never took place. There have been examples of bishops who have been. This was in a way that really shouldn't have been done, but they thought there was an emergency. They needed to do this in order to achieve peace. It really seems the Pope should have been consulted beforehand, but we don't know exactly the circumstances they were under when they did that. We'll not judge them too severely, especially given the fact that the Pope approved of it after the fact. But still, we have to say that was not good. There have been much worse cases of orders being, and we'll say, conferred and received under circumstances that were positively nefarious, which the Pope later on, there were instances of Pius IX, in one case of instituting a bishop who had been consecrated outside the church. I believe it was positively in schism, if I recall the exact circumstances correctly. But he was made a bishop of the Catholic Church later on for the good of souls. the Pope deeming that to be necessary, or at least to be expedient, and not gravely imprudent in any way. Okay, so peace was restored to the Eastern churches. In justice to Zeno, our author says, it should be stated, therefore, the 2 years which followed his restoration, he left nothing untried to bring about this desirable result, that is, restoring peace to the... Notice that we use the term here, our author uses the term the Eastern churches, meaning the various dioceses of the East. And here, when I talk about churches, even within the Catholic Church, meaning different sections of the church. But especially different dioceses is the way that's sometimes used. I'm not talking about schismatic sects here. But the uprightness of intention, for which we must give him credit, was supported neither by prudence, strength of mind, nor connection of design. In a word, none of the qualities which make a great prince. Maybe he had good intentions, but was not particularly well qualified, was not particularly well endowed to be emperor. Guided by Acacius, he was not long in spoiling his own work, and affixed his name to a too famous edict, the source of numberless divisions in the church. First troubles were occasioned by First troubles in this new wave of trouble is occasioned by the death of Timothy Solophaciolus, patriarch of Alexandria. The bishops, clergy, and monks of the city elected as his legitimate successor John Talaya, a zealous priest whose talent and virtue had won the appreciation of Solophaciolus, by whom he was accordingly entrusted with the administration of the temporal affairs of the church. John Talaya wrote immediately to St. Simplicius to obtain letters of communion, again, from letters of communion being sought from the Pope from the East, letters being sent from the East to the Pope seeking communion, confirmation, and at the same time sent circular letters to the bishops of the great Eastern and Western sees to notify them of his election. So this is a major see, a patriarchal see, Alexandria, which the title patriarch, as we've said before, means nothing more than the fact that the Pope has granted that title to that see, and meaning that it's been pointed out, made conspicuous in some way, give it some kind of dignity, but all that at the pleasure of the Holy See. Nobody can claim that as being a divine right, which the Pope cannot in any way affect. It is not the case, but it is the point being, though, it is a major see. It's a very prominent see. Someone, a new bishop coming into this see needs to, really everybody ought to know about that. But an unfortunate combination of circumstances, Acacius of Constantinople only received Talaya's letter after having learned his election, though indirectly. So learned of his election only indirectly. This involuntary delay of the transmission of the synodal letters was enough to prejudice Acacius against John Talaya. So notice in the East, a source of trouble, a source of schism, and also a source of touchiness. For some reason, somehow there was a delay in his being notified of the election. Then he's told only afterwards, or only later, somehow he gets a notification that this is the new bishop. So and he gets upset about that. So touchiness set off here. He was determined to use all his influence with the emperor to procure the nullification of Talaya's election. So proceeding from touchiness to troublemaking. And without troubling himself to reconcile his past conduct with his newborn resentment, he urged upon the emperor the reappointment to Alexandria of the intruder Peter Mungus, whose banishment he had so strongly urged. So, more trouble. He persuaded the emperor that the two factions, Catholic and Eutychian, would continue to disturb Alexandria until a bishop was elected equally acceptable to both parties. Now he's just giving, as they say, straight up terrible advice to the emperor, who clearly is not of the strength of character or having quality of judgment to oppose him very well. Peter Mungus, he said, will perfectly fulfill this condition. The Eutychians are devoted to him. The Catholics can urge no reasonable objection against him once he has abjured his error. Though, notice he's, to use a common expression, he's counting his chickens before they're hatched. There's no guarantee that Peter Mungus will abjure his error. Peter Mungus was secretly informed of the intrigue in his favor and had it seconded by all his friends at court. He pledged himself to bring about a union of the two parties, and Zeno, deceived by his skillful strategy, yielded to the natural weakness of his character. So things are going south here again very quickly. This is only a few years after. Notice everything seemed to have been smoothed over in 479. Now we're in 482, just a few short years later, and things are trouble. Start going there. There's new trouble again, brewing in the east, unfortunately. So this is something that people, it seems, in these situations that are politically charged, people seem to lose sight easily of the fact that matters of faith are the most important. Faith and morals, the most important matters. You guys say, oh, well, we'll smooth things over politically here, or satisfy somebody's touchiness, appease somebody's ruffled feathers by just brushing over matters of faith, at least for the time being. Those are the most important matters. If you don't have, as even they misapplied the principles, but even the pagan Romans understood that without religious unity, you will never have national unity. Of course, the religion that they sought to impose did not bring about true unity of faith, because they did not have the faith. But they understood, they at least had that much common sense. If you can't agree on those most important matters, you will never agree on lesser matters. At least not for any length of time. We'll never get along for any length of time if you don't agree on the most important of all matters. All other issues will be solved with relative ease if you do agree on those. So, he wrote to the Pope. This seems to be who he is. Sometimes it's unclear. It seems to, Acacius. It seems to be Acacius who's writing this. He wrote to the Pope protesting the unworthiness of Talia and asked for the restoration of Peter Mongus to the See of Alexandria as the only means of pacification. Simplicius returned no direct reply. Okay, this is the emperor. The use of pronouns is a little bit problematic sometimes. It seems the emperor wrote that letter, but at the urging of Acacius, so he may not have ghost written it or anything like that, but some sense came from him. But in any case, the letter was written directly by the emperor, sent from him to the Pope. Simplicius returned no direct reply to this communication of the emperor. On the 15th of July, 482, he wrote to Acacius expressing his surprise and grief at having received no letter from him in connection with Zenos in so important a matter. He adds this, the acts of a very full and orthodox council held in Egypt were lately sent to the see according to the usual custom. So it seems that Acacius is being a little bit shady here. He's already giving terrible advice, but he instead of, it may be that he wrote to the emperor hoping that it wouldn't seem to be coming from him. So perhaps he just put the emperor up to it. It's a little hard to say at this distance, but such possibilities arise to mind when you see something like this. The Pope clearly would have expected that the Bishop of Constantinople have something to say about this, and he didn't. Well, why didn't you say anything? Maybe that he wanted the emperor to be the one to front this thing. It's possible. It's possible. In any case, clearly Acacius, that's not something that could be put past him at this point, definitely. So he adds the act, the Pope said, in other words, this is a little bit unusual. We just, I thought everything was just smoothed over a few years ago. What's going on here? They informed us that once at the death of our brother of holy memory, the Bishop Timothy, and of the unanimous choice of the faithful which had placed John in the vacant see. So in other words, matters of faith we had smoothed over. We had everybody was the heretics were being expelled in that sense, smoothed over, not in the sense of being ignored or buried or neglected. But heretics, we thought we were getting rid of them. Anybody who was unrepentant was being ousted. As a source of poison amongst the faithful. And we had a new bishop elected. What is the issue here? Why all of a sudden agitation again? As he was believed to be gifted with all the qualities that make a good bishop, it seemed that there was nothing left but to thank God, to rejoice that a Catholic bishop had without difficulty succeeded the deceased prelate, and to give to his authority by the confirmation of the apostolic see the desired stability. Yet I have just received letters from the emperor in which he represents Talia as unworthy of the exalted dignity. I have therefore suspended the sentence of confirmation, lest I be accused of having acted too inconsiderately in a matter of so great moment. So here is the Pope, who was exercising, I now have, of course, he's canonized pontiff, acting, withholding his confirmation, at least for the moment, out of prudence. Getting a confused reading on the situation here. I get everything seemed to be fine, but then all of a sudden, from the emperor, well, not from you, meaning to the bishop of Constantinople, to whom he's writing directly, I get a letter saying that he's not suitable. This new candidate is not suitable. So I don't understand what's going on here. Why am I getting this from the emperor, not from a bishop? And not only from the emperor, but in the silence of the bishop. And why am I getting this despite all having received many signs to the contrary? There's just confusion here. Well, what's happening? We need to have this cleared up. Probably the information he doesn't have is that this is all due to the touchiness of Acacius, who's really had his feathers ruffled for some reason, and is causing trouble as a result. Serious trouble now. At least it's blossoming into serious trouble. So, of course, the Pope may not have access to that information, and so it generally gets, assuming everybody is acting in good faith here, he's getting, you can see why this would be a genuine source of confusion. I thought everything was fine. Now we're getting complaints. What's happening? So these words are remarkable in as much as they go to prove the right of the Pope on the confirmation of bishops. And once again, we come back to that. In the East, the Emperor of the East writing to the Pope for confirmation concerning the confirmation of the bishop in the East. Now, the details of the troublemaking, putting all of that aside, you see once again deference to the Holy See in these supremely important matters. So first, we find a council and a full council asking the Pope's approval of an episcopal election carried on canonically and without opposition. Second, though John had been consecrated immediately after his election, still his authority to be full, entire, unshaken, in other words, to receive jurisdiction at all, in fact, he needs to be confirmed by the approval of the Holy See. Absolutely. No question. There you can see that this time the discipline was different for choosing a bishop. The local faithful were allowed to put forward their candidate who would either be approved or not by the Pope. You can see, due to circumstances such as these, why the discipline would later change to, no, the Pope decides, and that's it. Maybe he'll accept some nominations or not, as prudence may or may not advise, but certainly he chooses himself. No more of this, we don't think, the emperor, the civil power writing, or the bishops, after due election, which everybody seemed to agree this candidate was good. No, exactly, he's got problems, and who knows what the motives for saying that is. Who knows what the motives are for saying that. No, forget that. Maybe we'll accept nominations, but it will be the pontiff himself who makes the judgments as to the qualities of the candidate and installs him, and okay, now here's your bishop. He can do, absolutely speaking, that probably do at any time. It's just, you can see how earlier in the history of the church, when the general fervor was higher and the tendency to be troublemakers was less, why there might have been, okay, the Pope will say, all right, whom do you want to be your bishop? Absolutely speaking, could impose somebody right here, right now, but we're not going to do that. We know everybody is well behaved, so we'll see whom you want. Okay, someone good, very good. Go ahead. He can be the bishop. He's confirmed. But you can see how circumstances might demand that change. So Saint Simplicius, in his letter to Acacius, formally opposed the restoration of Peter Mungus to the Patriarchal See of Alexandria. So okay, well, maybe the personal qualities and qualifications of John Talaya aside, Peter Mungus is not going back in. No way. That would be a very bad idea. This promise, says the Pope, to embrace the true faith can only secure his return into Catholic communion, but not his elevation to the episcopal dignity. As we said before, this is standard. This is very well put and very nice to see a Pope making a firm stand on this. You can see why he got canonized. But at the same time, no, he's not going to become a bishop. So this is standard policy in the history of the church. This is nothing unusual. It's great to see a Pope making a firm stand on it. But it's not unusual. This is in itself not an unusual policy. Every repentant heretic will be readmitted to the church, no question. It's morally certain that he has abjured his heresy and he's put that behind him. He will be readmitted to the church. But it's one thing to be readmitted to amongst the faithful. It's an entirely another thing to be elevated to the dignity of being a bishop, and another thing still to be elevated to such a prominent seat. Is that no? If Peter Mungus is repentant, fine. He'll be readmitted to the church. But there's no way he's going to be a bishop or the patriarch of Alexandria. There's no question about that. That is not happening. So the sovereign pontiff wrote to the emperor in the same strain. So maybe not exactly the same thing, but relaying the same conclusions. The energy and earnestness he ever displayed in the cause of faith and sound doctrine seemed to grow in the soul of Saint Simplicius in proportion as a long and painful illness wasted his body. He renewed his appeals to Acacius, but his letters remained unanswered. Acacius was a court-bred bishop, wily, proud, and obstinate in his resentment, as he was pliant and wavering in his affections. Unprincipled, or his Darius is really going off on him here. Unprincipled, effeminate, inconsistent. In a word, one of those degenerate Greeks who must stand at the foot of the throne to hasten its downfall by their dark and secret intrigues. So, the characteristics of the Eastern Roman Empire making themselves clear. He made no account of the Pope's wishes, persisted in urging on the emperor to pretended measures of conciliation, and thus drew him into the performance of an action fraught with the most disastrous results. Really going after this guy here, and he probably deserves it. It's a disappointment that he would turn out to be this way after having been on the right side earlier on, but that's fallen human nature for you. Like all weak-minded princes, Zeno was easily led by those who would flatter his inclination of his secret wishes. So someone else who was clearly Zeno made some Emperor Zeno here did some good to the service of the church earlier on, but that didn't last, unfortunately. He solaced himself with the hope of settling religious disputes. So this is a problem that we've seen starting even with even with Emperor Constantine himself, really, but certainly with his sons. This emperors getting in over their heads, the civil power getting in over its head in religious matters. Obviously, the civil power must take interest in matters of faith, but it's one thing to take interest, and it's another thing to become excessively involved to beyond the competence of the state, and the emperor beyond maybe the personal competence of what the emperor even knows and understands, and thereby causing trouble to the church. Everything must be properly ordered in every way. Not only must the system be correctly installed, the system be correct, but the boundaries established by that system must also be observed. So, he solaced himself with the hope of settling religious disputes, and while proving himself utterly unable to maintain peace in his own court, he thought himself called to heal by a word dissensions which were altogether out of his province. Out of his province, meaning far beyond his competence at what he's authorized to deal with. The famous edict known as the Henoticon, or Formula of Union, was published under the influence of these ideas. We are entreated on all hands, says Zeno in this edict, to effect a union of the churches and to remedy the fatal effects of their division. For a vast number of persons who have thus been deprived of a vast of the probably should be one sentence there. For a vast number of persons who have the fatal effects of the division, for a vast number of persons who have thus been deprived of the benefits of baptism and communion. That could be a separate sentence. Yes, yeah. The reason being that a vast number of persons have been thus deprived. Blood has even been shed in the domestic strife. Who would not wish to see the end of such a state of things? So he may be indicating true evils, maybe referencing certain true evils that have afflicted the East, but because there have been certain evils afflicting the East does not mean that he's the one to solve them, or solve religious issues, or solve matters of faith or ecclesiastical discipline. And in any case, you can see that just a few years earlier, that was done. So it's not as though the Pope is being negligent. Of course, in retrospect, that he's a saint, but even when you don't know that at the time, it's still, this is for the Pope to deal with. So yeah, definitely there's trouble in the East, and that would be great to see an end to that, but he's clearly looking upon himself as the one who's to do this. And that is not the case. I mean, even a good emperor would not be the one to do that, and he's far from perfect. Even as far as just natural qualities, he's far from perfect. So we have therefore determined to make a solemn profession of our faith in the presence of the whole world. Yeah. Those words in themselves are not evil. Yes, the civil power should and meeting must make clear its profession of its adherence to profession of commitment to defending the Catholic faith. But we'll see where he goes with this next time. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, amen. Subituum presidium confugimus, Sancte Dei Genitrix nostris,